Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ventures Podcast. This episode with Nick Wilger is all about low-code, no-code, how you as an entrepreneur, or if you know anyone who's an entrepreneur to recommend this episode, can think about how to find the right team member or the right partner to build your minimum viable product, as if you're building a digital startup, with low-code, no-code, specifically Bubble, and we talk about others. And the low-code, no-code era has changed the game. Instead of finding an engineer or an engineering shop and spending a bunch of money where you're probably going to waste a lot of time and money, the new era is upon us where you can build that more efficiently for less time and less money. But there be dragons. There are all kinds of dangers when building a digital product. And so in this episode, we talk a lot about it, those nuances and what you should be thinking about in terms of your ability to save time and money when building your startup. So if you're listening to this episode, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com. There I'll have more extensive show notes to different things that we talk about today and all the right links and things. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcast. You can just search for Ventures and it should show up. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Nick Wilger. All right, Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Will.
I'm excited about this episode because, as we work with founders, it's the question. Do I no-code, low-code it, my MVP, or do I build it from scratch? What are the cost benefit? You're a low-code, no-coder that I'm very, very impressed with your background, how you've gotten into it, the different things that you got going. So would you mind kicking us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this world.
Yeah, so I dove into no-code back in 2017 when I was in college. I was hoping to build an app for my first startup. I wanted to build like a party planning app, and you could, connect vendors and everything through your phone, and it does all the organizing so that you could host amazing parties really fast without calling all these different people. And basically, I went down the traditional path of interviewing development agencies who quoted me like $120,000 to build the initial product. And so I was like, okay. So then I went to Mr. Investor and I was like, hey, will you give me $120,000 to build this app? And he's like, no, but you should, try and get an MVP and drive some revenue, and then maybe we can talk. Okay. So then I go out and I'm like, okay, Mr. Developer, how much is it to build an MVP? Oh, that'll be like 40 grand. And as a college student, I was like, okay, should I take out a loan? And ended up trying to find someone who would build it for me. Couldn't find anybody. So then I was like, I'm just going to try and build this myself. So I dove into no code, dove into digital marketing, and eventually landed on Bubble and WordPress. And then in 2020 launched my no code agency, Efficient. And then last year, we launched the Efficient Accelerator, which is basically the first no-code career platform doing more educational stuff.
Sweet. So yeah, I've had Josh, the co-CEO, founder of Bubble, on the show before, and he gave us the big high level. But I'm definitely curious, from your background, somebody who's not a developer, which is cool, because I've been building web apps for almost 20 years now. Spent lots of time, learned Ruby on Rails way back, OG, built tons of web apps. And I'm new to Bubble myself in terms of developing, but I spent a lot of my time advising, investing in very early stage technology startups that usually need a minimum viable product. And right now, in the last couple of years, it's been the huge conversation. Do you low code, no code it, or do you figure out how to come in and do it? So talk to us. What have you been able to pull off? Now, how did you learn? What has it been like as a non-technical person coming in, or I guess non-software engineer coming in? Definitely a technical. What did it go?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I started off building a lot of websites I was like a WordPress freelancer from 2017 to like 2019, and I dabbled in Bubble, but it was still pretty new, and no one really wanted to pay for it. And then it just like shot up. Like Bubble, They went from, it took them 10 years to get to 1 million users, and then in 1 year they doubled to 2 million. So
Mm.
they're like just exploding in terms of interest. You know, I've built a lot of different products in Bubble and other no-code tools. Adalo is another big no-code tool on the rise that I think has a lot of potential. Um, you know, the probably the most advanced product I've built with no code was a data analytics product that was aiming to identify bias in HR technology.
Mm.
And so we were building this thing for enterprise companies, and they would basically input their API of their HR technology system.
Mhm.
It would integrate with our custom backends. So we built the backend entirely in Azure. It was coded in Azure. And then we used APIs to connect with Bubble for the front end.
Mm.
And we're able to basically pull in the API information of these enterprise companies and display it in unique dashboards. And we had, I mean, for the MVP that we built, it was very like low level type AI. I wouldn't even call it AI, but it was just like formulas to show patterns and identify potential areas in the data that could be linking to, you know, uh, Bob the butthole, who just, every guy who sounds like he's black, he just instantly red flags him and doesn't move him on to the next interview. So
Mm.
that's probably the most advanced product. Bubble, you know, can handle millions of users for sure. And as someone who's non-technical, that's really great because typically, you know, no code started in 1985 with Microsoft Excel. Everyone knows Excel. And so I think my prediction is that Bubble will become the next Excel.
Mm.
Bubble has a lot of potential. If they can get right um, the learning curve, I think there's a lot of opportunities there for DevOps and startups and all those people.
Yeah. Okay. So from an education standpoint, then, for let's say the non-technical or non-software engineer type people coming in and listening to
Yeah.
this episode, wondering how Bubble or some kind of low code no code stack can help them. When we're talking about front end and back end, right? We're
Mhm.
talking about there's what shows up in the browser, right? The HTML,
Yeah.
CSS, and JavaScript that are creating the experience in a browser, either on a desktop or a tablet or a mobile, some web browser with some dimension and some pixel density, et cetera, et cetera. You want that experience to be amazing. So we'll talk about that scope. We'll talk about mobile apps and things later. But for
Okay.
now, for people, just for your education, so for the listener, you have this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that have to go into a browser to be read.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about when we talk about the front end. Back end is the server that's essentially communicating with the database or any other third-party APIs or anywhere else that it's getting or crunching its data, and then serving that data in via HTML, CSS, and JavaScript into web browsers. So when you talked about before, let's talk about the different options.
Yeah.
Bubble can do that whole stack, or Bubble can do a
Yes.
part of that stack?
Yes.
Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And for a lot of startups who are kind of in the intro phase, there's great tools for front end. One of the best that I would recommend would be Webflow. Webflow is amazing. They're so simple in terms of the code. It like WordPress was, you know, you got all these plugins. It's bogged down by themes and all this stuff. Webflow is just super clean. It delivers amazing experiences. It's great for SEO. And then you can export the code. They're actually looking at integrating with React. So for some startups, Webflow could be a great option. I would say that most startups, when they're looking to create their MVP, a lot of times you can just use like Typeform, which is just a survey product to deliver your MVP. So if you just have a landing page and a form, a lot of times you can deliver some type of quiz, or do you want to find out why your car is getting bad gas mileage? Like, fill out our form and we'll see if our product uh, can solve your problem. Or if it's a SaaS business, are you looking to find the co-founder of your dreams? We're launching an MVP mobile app. Click here to join our beta and take our quiz to learn about what we're doing. And it's like with any startup, you have to start with like building an email list, building that kind of initial group of people who are interested in what you're doing, even if it's not built yet. The great thing about no code is you can build something that is functional in a couple of hours. Or if you need something that's a little more advanced, if you need a mobile app, you need like a web app that has a back end, then you could get it done in a couple of weeks. And so Will, what do you think? I'll ask you a question. So, do you think that more startups want to build the app themselves, but just think it's too hard? Or do you think that most startups do want to outsource that to some guy who like knows what he's doing and can do that, or a CTO?
I think the founders just want if they're building a digital product, right? And it's okay to
Yep.
start with a web app, doesn't need to be a native mobile to start. They want it up and running however they can pull that off. And they know that they're doing lots of different things like fundraising, like communicating with those investors, like trying to recruit a team, like trying to deal with the operations of an early stage startup. They know they can't do it all themselves. So I think most founders, this is not everybody, but I think most founders would love to have some kind of co-founder to handle the product, meaning all the product stuff, build the product, recruit themselves, recruit any engineer that's needed to build the product. And a lot of founders, if they're wearing the CEO role hat, are just trying to bring in the money. And so they're constantly asking, how much money do I need? How much time and money? Right? So I'd say that's most people. If they could have a co-founder, have some kind of incubation partner or somebody for as quickly and as cheaply as possible, right? This is why Bubble and other low-code things are taking off. They can deliver an experience that's in their head that they want to bring to their users or customers. That's their main objective.
Yeah.
So the word on the street is, and based on my experience working with this now across multiple portfolio companies that are working with Bubble, is that often the original, the founder with the idea, and sometimes there's two or three of them, they have an idea, and if they're not Bubble engineers or they're not software engineers, then they have to translate what's in their head and napkin sketches, et cetera, into a series of mockups, wireframes and mockups.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could talk about this a lot.
So talk about this. Because that product handoff to get it ready to build in Bubble or get it ready to build even in regular code, that is often a very inefficient and clunky process that people don't realize because it's an unknown for them.
Yes.
That it creates inefficiency. So your company name, imagine, has something to do with this. Talk to us about it.
100%. So this is something I'm pretty fired up about because as an entrepreneur and as a developer, there's a lot of problems, both on the startup founder side and on the no-code developer side. With this particular issue, taking the idea and turning it into an app. There's a lot of developers who will say they can do it, and they can't, because I think if there's any startup that wants to build an app, you have to start with a plan. And a lot of times that plan can be, a napkin, like drawing something on a napkin. But at the end of the day, if you want a house, well, let's say you're looking at getting a house. You're not like, if you pull up a house that you took pictures of and you're like, hey, I want you to build me this house. I took pictures of this house. I want you to build that for me.
Good analogy.
Like, is that gonna, like, okay, sure. But I need to know, like, what are the materials of the house? What are the dimensions of the house? Like, how big do you want your living room? How big do you want your kitchen? Like, what kind of materials you want for your roof? So you need some type of blueprint to actually develop this thing. And that's exactly how it is with app development. Is people think that they can take pictures of websites and they can hand it to a developer, and that developer will instantly understand what the founder wants. And that's not how it works. That's just not how it works. You have to build a blueprint. And devs out there who think that they can build an app from a napkin, chicken scratch, stop it. Like, this is something that I've done. I've made these mistakes, man. I've lost a lot of money. Uh like, even right now I'm in the midst of a situation where I didn't plan enough ahead of time with the founder, and we built a product that they're not super happy with. And
Mm,
so this is something that I think devs need to plan more, create a project plan. Like, we
yeah.
have we've developed a process at Efficient, and with the Efficient Accelerator, when we teach people how to build apps, you start with a project plan, and basically that can get really complicated. And so, like, we have the template, but basically you want to detail out what do you want your app to do? How should a user experience your app? And is this something that we need in our MVP, or is this something that we can maybe have in version 2 and work with someone who gets that process? So, app development in 3 steps: project management, design, development. Project management is the organization. You need that first. Design, how's the look and feel of your app? You also need that. If you're a startup, if you want to make money, your app can't just look like crap. You need something that is pretty, that gives people a good experience, because that's how you're going to make money. And development is actually the actual code. People can get bogged down on all 3 of those steps, but if you have someone who's working with you who gets those 3 things, uh, you'll be in good hands.
So another way to say it is that in the low code, no code era, whereas before a visionary with an idea, CEO type, is trying to find a CTO, a technical co-founder, and they typically
Yeah.
go and try to find an engineer. That engineer may be really good at databases and data structures and algorithms and conditional flow and DevOps and all the engineering things. But the bridge, what I've seen happen time and time and time again, is that the visionary doesn't understand enough, that they have unknowns about how to build a digital product. The
Yes.
engineer also has unknowns about how to think about experience design, how to think.
Yep.
They don't know the customer or the idea well enough as much of the thing, and it
Yes.
creates lots of inefficiency, lots of burnt cash, and even if they have to
Yes.
use an agency or whatever. In the low code, no code era, now the visionary needs to maybe first, and I'd be curious about your input about this, needs to first find somebody who's a really good product designer. They can sit down and use a tool like Figma. It seems like Figma is just the
Yep.
go-to now. And use a tool like Figma to create a series of low fidelity to high fidelity wireframes, low fidelity to high fidelity
Yep.
mockups, and really drill in page by page, experience by experience, what this software application could look like. And
Yeah.
then they could turn around and hire a shop like yours, or maybe go through an accelerator or go through a program like yours, which I'm excited to talk about. And maybe that product person can learn Bubble enough to do it, or maybe they have somebody who can come in for a relatively low cost for a relatively low period of
Yes.
time, although it still costs money and time.
Yes.
Then they can engineer something, but usually that's the step that's missed, is the really great wireframe to
Yeah.
mockups and all the branding and visual and color palette and mood boards and everything that come along with that design process. Does that sound like the right transition that we're coming into now with low code, no code, or what would you add or take away from that?
Yeah, I would say, specifically with the introduction of Figma and just the no code era in general, this whole visual design concept is the era that we're in. So people are are you don't have to um, rely on, some guy who's really, really smart, who has all these degrees, has built all these products to build you a simple, like a social media clone or an Airbnb clone or something like that. You just need someone who can understand your idea and can communicate it back to you in in the form of wireframes, I would say. Um, the I would say that wireframes are a great place to start. And for any startup that is considering building a product with no code, just like Will said, if you find someone who can uh, who understands story, understands has like a little bit of background in marketing, knows how to use Figma, and can basically put themselves in your customer's shoes, then they'll be able to design what you want, and you'll be able to take that design to, the guy with all the degrees, or a no coder, and get something built really fast, and really cheap. Like, no code in terms of cost, no code, if you hire a team of developers in the US who are doing no code and compare them to dev shops doing Ruby or whatever traditional development, we are way, way cheaper. Like, uh like a dev shop would charge like $100,000 for what we can build in 10 in the US.
Yeah, about a
Now, if
10x
you look,
savings is what I'm seeing. Yeah.
yes, 10x savings for sure. Uh, Now, yeah,
Devil's in the
and so
details there, because all the
yes,
product things, that's where the inefficiency comes in, right? And I actually have been doing this for almost 20 years now, and I really recommend, if you're a CEO and you're someone who's probably not going to be the bubble engineer or be the software engineer, I recommend that there's actually two steps before the wireframing. And the reason why I say this, and not everyone is a good written communicator, so that, a lot of
yep,
people have different ways of communicating this. So those that aren't written can do this in various, can like record videos or other things. But
yep,
I recommend two steps. One, that the CEO, the founder CEO person, should do what I call an overview story. Just tell a story of the different types of people: administrators, power users, normal users, whatever the user types are. Tell a story of what the end-to-end experience of those different types of people interacting with your software application look like. Some
yep,
people are great at writing that story out. I call that an overview story. Some people like to just record a Loom video and
yep,
chat or whatever. Point is, you're creating an overview story. Then I recommend what I call a UI spec. Take that story and translate it into basically page by page, experience by experience. This is what I see in my mind's eye in writing across the page. The reason why I recommend those two steps before you wireframe is because it gets as much communication out of the visionary person's
yes,
head on in writing, so that
yes,
even if you are the visionary person who's going to do the wireframing, that you've forced to create an overview story and a UI spec, that allows you to then get to a place where you've really thought it out. And then as
yeah,
a bonus, I tend to actually tell people, do a flow chart through your things before you go even build the full
yep.
wireframe. So with
Yep,
Figma,
that's the project
right?
plan. Yeah, that's the project plan, and that's what we want. Is we want to see that as a development agency, or just as a development freelancer. They would rather work with someone, and you're going to save money if you develop this first. If you go through this process of telling your story, I mean, or telling the user story. I mean, we in in the development world, you have user stories and epics and
Right,
all this stuff, which can bog down founders.
right.
So I think that
Let the
that will
engineers take care of that. That's right.
exactly. But if you
Sometimes an
have
overview
that,
story is like a rough
yes,
collection of technical user stories.
exactly.
Yeah,
You start with that, then a developer can take that, can have more or less a draft of the technical spec user stories, and can build off of that. And then you just go back and forth and you refine it, and then everyone's happy.
yeah. I think your analogy. That's the first time I've heard it, but it's really good. Your analogy of, hey, I took a picture of the house, make me a house like this. Well, wait a minute. We got a lot to do And then oftentimes they'll be like, I want a house like this. How much is it going to cost and how long is it going to
Yes.
be? Right. And
Use
that's
it.
a
Yeah.
that's the difficult process. That makes or breaks the best agencies that can break this down and educate the buyer on
Yes.
what are they buying and what is that like.
Yep.
I don't know if anybody's ever tried to hire a contractor for a remodel or anything related to physical things. It always takes longer. It always takes more budget. It's usually they're bad communicators because there's just so many unknowns and unknowns along the
Yes.
way. The $1 trillion question is, how do you solve this problem, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, we got just a couple minutes left. Tell us about what you got going. Tell us about your accelerator or
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. So basically, we're building the world's first no-code career platform. So basically, we want to make app development accessible for everyone. Founders, freelancers, moms who are married to IT junkies. We want to give them the opportunity to build apps on their own and make money from it. And so we've built a platform and we're looking to we offer boot camps. So we have one this week. We have hackathons. We're building this community around getting jobs in no code because the no code movement is not like it's not something that's just going to go away. It's something that's going to stay. And there are people who are willing to pay folks with these skills. And so we are focusing now. If there's startups or CEOs or founders who want to build their own app in no code, great. Our platform is probably not the best for you. We're focusing mostly on people who want to start a career in no code. So we offer a community, we offer boot camps, we offer a master class.
Cool.
So it's a 2-week, training. You get certified, and then I have built relationships with various agencies and startups who want to hire developers. And so, if you're a startup, if you want to learn how to build apps, obviously you can reach out to me or whatever, or book a call on my website, and I'll direct you in the right place or connect with me on LinkedIn. But the real opportunity, I think, is hiring people from something like the Efficient Accelerator to build your app for you at a really low cost. So these are people who they've built like 3, 4, 5 different products. They've been through our process. They understand how to take your story and put it into a project plan. They understand how to wireframe. They understand how to build the product and code it in Bubble or Dalo. And you're able to get someone who has, a lot of these people are probably not going to be from the US. 80% of no coders are not in the US. And so that means cheaper. So for startups, it's a great option to get someone who has the skills, has the ambition to learn, and is willing to grow with your startup. And they're not that expensive either.
So where do people go? What URL do they go to learn more?
So efficientaccelerator.com, EFFYCIENTACCELERATOR.com.
Great.
So efficientaccelerator.com. Our agency is efficient, EFFYCIENT.com.
Great.
You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Nick Wilger. And I would love to chat more.
Awesome. I'll put those links in the show notes. Nick, this has been great. Really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Will.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you in your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.